Welcome back to episode 7 of the LAB77 podcast. I'm your host, Hem, and I'm here today with a very special guest, Sentrock.
Yo, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Yes, living legend right here, guys. Living legend.
Man, it made me sound old now.
What?
I am kind of old, but I appreciate that. It's an honor. Thank you.
Yes. So could you share the story of how you got started as a muralist in Chicago?
So I was going to Columbia College down the street from here. And like when I wasn't in classes, I would run around and put my stickers up and catch little tags, painting like little abandoned spots. And I think over time, people started to notice my work. And we're just like, yo, you got a wall, you want to paint over here, we're doing this. And yeah, I just started painting putting my work up and painting different spots. And little by little, just started to like snowball.
Chicago is known for its vibrant art scene. How has the city influenced your work and your style?
I mean, I just think the rich history, like even for like my culture, my heritage, you go to Pilsen or Little Village, and there's so much like murals that represent like my Latino culture. And I think, I'm gonna be super inspired by that. It's like makes me feel more empowered of what I want to do in my work. And I feel like everyone's way more accepting out here too, like in the city, like Chicago and South Side, Southwest Side, everyone's accepting of work, of like accepting of murals, and that's just part of like, it's part of the culture. And so it's not like I have to like sell my work. It's like people embrace it, they love it, so it's definitely inspired me.
What themes or messages do you try to convey with your murals, and are there any recurring motifs in your work?
Motif, I guess a reoccurring motif is it's just kind of like the idea of like staying fly, or like finding freedom, stay free. And that's why my reoccurring like character in the Bird City Saint is about like freedom. It has like, it's like a boy, it could be anybody, but puts on this mask. It's kind of like an alter ego or the superhero power of like finding freedom and being able to fly and escape.
That's dope. How'd you come up with that? Because I've seen that's like a staple in your work.
Yeah.
How'd you come up with that character?
Yeah, I feel like it's like a visual narrative. Like I have this story that I continue to share throughout my murals or anything. And it just started off me just like doing like painting birds, and I would paint different animals all the time. And it was like, I think now looking back at my culture of like even like indigenous, like the Mayan, Aztec, and like learning about that, how they would channel different animals and masks. And I was like, oh, that's dope. And so I've been able to like tap into that. But for me, it's more this idea of like someone wearing the bird, because I think just growing up, I just always wanted to feel like free, or wanted to find freedom, through my neighborhood or whatever, just find my own voice. And growing up, I shared this a lot. Like my pops was in and out of prison a lot, or jail. And I think for me, like my idea is like, as a kid, when you don't get to see your pops or whatever, I had the idea of like finding freedom or flying away, escape. So I think that's what always like resonated for me.
Your murals have like a strong connection to the community. Is there any like specific mural that had an impact?
For me, one of the most impactful murals that I've done was one that I took a portrait of my homie, his wife and their daughter, and I put the portrait up, I painted it, and I put a bird mask over his daughter. And it's like a really cool, mural of the mother holding the daughter with the wearing the bird mask, almost like the idea of like, like you can fly too, like one day, like, you find your wings, you're gonna grow, you're gonna find yourself. And I just think that, it's a very powerful mural. And just the story about it too, being, my friend's wife and child, and it's just like that whole story behind that. But I get so much responses from that one of people saying that that's their favorite, and everybody can see it's like off the Pink Line, off Damon, so it's probably the most visible one too.
And how do you go about collaborating with artists or businesses within the community?
When I collaborate with people, they know what they're getting. Like they know my style. I've already my character, or if it's not my character, then they know my very specific style and what I stand for. So it makes it a little bit easier when, let's say, I just collaborated with the Bulls. I'm not going to paint my Bird Mask character, but I still took the idea of like a child wearing a mask, or the idea of reflecting, you know, my environment with that. So like with the bulls, we did a print, we did a pin, and then we're dropping some plushies for the season 2. But it's like the idea of like a kid with like a bull's mask. So instead of the kid, for me, wanting to be a bird and fly away, now it's a kid in the city of Chicago wanting to kind of be like a Chicago bull. It's taking the idea of this brand or a different artist or organization, and it's like, all right, tell me your story. All right, I'm gonna take that, and then I'm gonna say it in my version. Impact.
What's your favorite? I don't know if you want to pick favorites.
Yeah, I can't really pick my favorite right now because I'm waiting for some checks to come in. No, I'm playing, but I think I did one with Devin Booker. You know, because I was born in Phoenix, and Devin Booker is probably my favorite, one of my favorite basketball players, and he plays for the Phoenix Suns. And when they reached out to me to work with him, I thought that was dope because it wasn't just a collaboration with me, him, and the Suns. It was a collaboration with nonprofit organizations. And one of those organizations was something that, like, as a kid, and my mom went through, you know, one of these organizations. So it was like almost like a full circle moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think for me, as the little, like, you know, 7-year-old kid who grew up in West Phoenix, I think that was for me, it impacted me a lot. Yeah.
So you're originally from Phoenix?
Yeah, I was born out there. I was born and raised out there in Phoenix, and then moved out here for school.
Oh.
Yeah.
So, like, how old were you when you moved to Chicago?
I was like my young 20s or mid 20s.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I was in Phoenix most of my life.
Oh.
Yeah.
How have you adapted to being in Chicago? Because it's definitely different than a lot of other cities.
Yeah, Chicago is crazy, you know, moving here from like a more West Coast environment than moving to here. And you know, it's funny out there, everybody thinks, at least where I'm from, everybody thought Chicago was like East Coast. Like, yo, what's it like in the East Coast? And then it's like, nah, it's Midwest. You know,
Yeah.
It has that vibe though. So coming out here, I had to adapt a lot. Just even like the neighborhood politics, and you know, all that stuff was crazy. But I think one thing that I loved out here was just that like grind and like a little bit of that grit that everybody has. You know, me growing up in like more of a hood environment, you got to have a little bit of that grit. So I felt a little bit comfortable, to be honest. And then I think the city just embraced my work because of that grit and that hustle and that grind, and the idea of just being like genuine to who I am. I never changed up who I was, and the city just embraced me, you know. And I like to say, you know, like I kind of developed my wings where I grew up, where I was born and raised, and then I learned to fly out here, essentially. Like I learned to take
deep.
off. Yeah. So yeah. But yeah, it's been a cool journey being out here. You know, it's basically, it feels it's home now. So
What's your creative process when designing and executing a mural?
well, first of all, the creative process is, all right, where is the mural going? I take into effect of like I said, like the location, the community, who's gonna see it, and then, you know, the dimensions, like vertical, if it's vertical, horizontal, or however. I just try to think like what's gonna fit best in that space. Yeah, because I feel like I always want my work to fit into the space it's at, you know. So then from there, it's just like the process of me sketching to that dimension. Like, all right, what's gonna look dope here? Like, what would fit and look and what's the word? Like, just benefit, you know, the surrounding environment. And then from there, I just think, what do I want to say too? Like, all right, what do I want to say with this opportunity? And I think that's more of the process, just going from there. Like, what do I want to say, and then just develop over time. Like the technical process is just sketching and going over each other. Like now I use the iPad for the most part, and then I just constantly going over, you know, dropping the opacity, draw again. All right, let me try that again, and just keep, you know, until I get the design where I want it.
How do you go from like such small scale on the iPad to large scale on the actual wall?
For me, large scale is way more easier. Like I'd rather paint a giant wall over doing a small painting or design any day. It's just easier because you have like more room to like mess up, and I like to be free with my work. Like I feel like my work is very spontaneous, like in the moment. So like if I have a wall and I'm able to freestyle, then I really allow myself to like make shapes and make it flow, and yeah, it's just way more fun. And I think I just able to adapt. Like for the design, I'm like, it's like pulling teeth. Like, all right, let me just try to do this. Let me create this, because then I know once I do this step, then it's gonna allow me, when I get to the wall, I'm gonna have it all planned out. I don't have to try to freestyle too much or come up with it on the spot. Gives me like a compass, a guide. But yeah, I'd rather paint big.
Do you mostly use spray paint or like acrylic paint, or
For murals, it's all spray paint.
okay.
Maybe I'll use some like roller and stuff like that, but nah, spray paint, that's my first love. Like that's the medium that I fell in love with. So yeah, give me spray paint all day. Yeah, I'll be happy. Yeah.
What brand? I'm just curious.
I mostly use a brand called 94, Montana 94, Montana Black. But those are like, because they've been around forever. Like since I was a teenager, they've been around, and those were like the first brands that were like for artists, for graffiti writers, for street artists. So I feel like they have the science and technology down.
Yeah.
Shout out to all the other companies though that are like, doing their thing.
The art scene can be competitive, so how do you maintain your unique voice and style while navigating the art world's demands?
Career-wise, how to continue to keep your career moving and staying, in the conversations is, I think that's exactly what it is. It's a conversation. Like there's a dialogue that's going on in the market, in the creative culture, and it's like, how do I, whatever you're saying as an artist, how do these brands want to team up? All right, let's say it together. Or these galleries, like, oh, we want to use our platform to elevate your voice. And I think that goes to like impact, whether it's like online, like social media, whether it's doing TikToks, which I don't have, but whether it's doing that, or whether it's putting 1 million stickers up all throughout the city. It's just about how can I continue to put my voice in this conversation that's going on. Yeah, just being a part of the larger dialogue. Like don't get caught up in just your 10 homies that are, doing art, or this one gallery or this one area. It's like, no, there's like a larger conversation in the city of Chicago, but also in the world. And it's like, how do you continue to be a part of that conversation?
How do you navigate just sort of what connections are worth putting that time and energy into?
Yeah. That's a good question. I think a way that, it's about saying relevant. Like make sure your work is relevant but also authentic. It's like this fine balance of like, all right, what's going on right now in society, but then also like, how do you stay true to you? So like, I know like little things. You can go to the fairs, Chicago Expo. All right, what's going on here? Like who's doing what's, it doesn't always have to just be paint on a canvas. Like, all right, oh, they're doing AI did this, da, da, da. Not saying you have to do it, but it's like understanding what's happening. Or like going to like Miami for Art Basel, like, just wanting to elevate. For me, I want to elevate my work. Like, okay, I can draw my character, I can paint murals, but then it's like, oh, what's a new technique of me sharing this? And then it's like different ways of, all right, create the best quality work you can do, but then it's like, how do you then share that story? Because there's 1,000 artists that are technically, to me, I feel are technically better than what I do, or have better skills, or have their masters in art from SAIC or wherever. But I feel like, all right, but does my work say what I want it to say? Like, is it impacting the people that I want it to impact? And it's doing that in different ways. For me, it's like relying on your strengths. For me, I had this character, so like, all right, let me adapt that into creating plush figures or vinyl figures or merch, or different things that way. Yeah, it's just about being able to like impact people. Sometimes it takes one opportunity and everything blows up, but it's like you always got to be ready for whatever opportunities.
Do you feel like you've had that moment, like a moment that was kind of like, oh wow, like this is big?
I feel like I used to think that way. I used to think like, if I get that moment, like I'm gonna feel it. But once you're in it, you don't feel it. It's like you gotta get. It's like almost like jumping in the water, you're surrounded, and you're like, you know, then once you get out and you look, you're like, oh, okay, I gotta appreciate that moment. Because then you're always chasing, like, you're always chasing that I made it moment, or always chasing like, oh, that was the lightning in the bottle moment for me. But it's like, it doesn't really work that way, because by the time you worked your ass off hard enough to get to that moment, you've already put in the 10,000 hours to allow that to happen. You know, it's like the perfect storm, because you put yourself in that position, and then you just got to learn to appreciate the moment when you're in it. Because yeah, you don't realize when you're in it. You just you just got to learn to appreciate it. Yeah.
How do you practice that yourself? Like, do you feel like you're good at that? Like,
No, I'm not good at it at all. No, it's driven me into, you know, sometimes as artists we get highs and lows. It's like, I'll post something on Instagram, or I'll do an event. You know, one day I'll have a sold out show, and my post thousands and hundreds of comments, and you know, the next following week I could do something like 5 comments, you know, whatever. And then, like, if you live or die by like the success or like those moments, it'll drive you crazy. Like, you know, subconsciously we don't realize, like, we're starting to like live by that. So I think I'm finally learning to just appreciate like what I do. Like, if I do this and nobody likes it, still the process of me doing that and creating it is the success, you know. And it almost sounds like that's a cop out. It feels like a cop out, like, oh, I did it, I should deserve an award. But you know, when you're creating, like, that is the reward, you know, that is the success, that you created exactly what you wanted to do, and you got to appreciate that. If people love it and it goes crazy, it goes viral, or some XYZ famous person buys that painting, then, you know, that's the bonus. That's you know. But I think for me, that's one thing that I've been learning of I can't live or die by like the highs and lows of the art career. And sometimes you just have to let it go and just create, you know, because what's gonna take off is gonna take off. You know, you just got to keep working. I was like spazzing out for a second. That was crazy.
what do you see as the future of public art, especially in a city like Chicago? And how do you envision your role as a muralist evolving in this context?
I think I'm gonna evolve to like into like a OG in the you know, like,
For sure.
like, all right, I might not paint as much, but I'm gonna start to develop, like, when I do one mural a year, it's gonna be like, you know, it's like an album. Like when your favorite, you know, musician drops an album, you remember that moment. And I think that's what I want to start doing, is like creating moments. Right now everything's so like comes and goes, you know. We painted this mural, it lasted for a couple years, it got taken down or painted over, or, you know, people forget. But I want to start, for me personally, I want to start creating work that's a moment, you know. And I think but I think overall, you know, I hope artists continue to just keep creating, keep adding dialogue to the work, you know. Like, for me, my work might not be that like political, but I feel like it's still the action of creating murals, the action of adding color to a brick wall that was blank, is, you know, that in a sense that's still political, you know. That's your ideology, that's what you believe in. I believe in creating art and finding freedom that way. And I think I just want there to be more, honestly. I just think the city needs more. Like, there's already a lot of murals, but there's also a lot of walls that can use a lot of color. And I hope, just for the growth of that, and the growth of these murals being moments, not like, oh, I want you to paint a mural of what I want, so it makes sense to me. Like, in my community, there's so many times people ask me, like, oh, would you paint the Virgin Mary, or would you do something religious, or would you do something that's a little bit more understanding to an older generation, which I'm all for, and I love that. But I also want to see the ideas of growth, not growth, but innovation, like something new. Like, all right, this is what's important to our culture. Let's take that, but then how do we say it in a new way, or in a different way? Or how do we continue to share those stories, but yeah, just the concept to be a little bit different or a little bit more innovative or thinking outside the box. Like, it's done in a lot of ways with like music or movies, and it's like, all right, now let's continue to do it like in the street art or in the 2D work as well. Because of social media, because of how everything is so like win or lose, good or bad, yes, no, everything's so criticized that a lot of the younger generation, I think the confidence is hard to like get. Like when we did the show together, like you did the show at my studio, there was 12 artists, like up and coming artists, and all their work was so dope. And I was like, bro, these artists are so dope. And then when you talk to them and I talk to you, and it's like sometimes I'm like, oh, like their technique and their style and everything they want to say is raw, but sometimes they feel like it's not good enough, or they don't feel like they have the experience, and I've been through that too, where you feel like you have imposter syndrome, like, damn, I'm not good enough, or I didn't know how to do this. And I think that's one of the biggest things. Like, I wish when I was 21, 22, like, bro, that's when you really have a lot to say. And it's like, but that's also when we feel the least like confident with our work sometimes, because we're still learning it. But everything you create and everything you develop, like, yo, like, nah, that's dope. Like, nah, lean into that. Like, be confident with what you're doing. Always be willing to learn and grow, but also be confident. Yeah.
What do you think is the most rewarding aspect of being a muralist?
I think the most rewarding, something that I witness often, is like when I'm outside. Like right now, we're at the park, me and my homie riding our bikes, and this little kid with his mom. The mom was like, "Oh, I'm sorry to bother you, but can we take a picture? We've seen this mural, or we've seen this mural," and he always points to them. And I think for me, that's one of the biggest rewards, is like little kids looking out and they see this character that I've created. Because growing up for me is like cartoons spoke to me a lot, and in a sense these murals are like kind of like cartoons for some of these kids in the neighborhood. Like they'll see it and they'll be inspired, and I think that's the most impactful for me, or something that's really like continue like inspired me to keep doing it for sure.
Are there any upcoming projects or collaborations that you're excited about?
The very next project I'm doing is something with Footlocker. We're basically I'm taking over a Footlocker, doing the entire like the inside of the walls, the interior. Then I'm doing murals on the outside, which I think would be dope. I like the idea of like sometimes for me, like I go to a store, or I go somewhere and you don't feel like comfortable being in there. You just feel like, damn, they're gonna like just like, all right, bro, leave. It's like, yeah, exactly. And then after that, I'm doing another show at my studio. I'm gonna do less artists. 12 was crazy, like to work with, because everybody has different schedules, and
Yeah.
I was like, nah, I'm gonna narrow this down to like 4, because 12 was crazy. But I had a good time. So we're gonna do that again, and then yeah, just working on murals, releasing new product, just stuff like that. Yeah.
That's exciting. The Footlocker thing, that sounds dope.
Yeah, that'll be fun. That'll be cool. Yeah, it's something cool about like, when you're a kid going to a store as a kid to buy shoes, and now that I'm an adult, being able to like work with those stores and work with those brands. Yeah, that's always a dope moment.
Yeah. I feel like younger you would be like so impressed and proud.
Yeah, he better be younger than me, because I feel like, yeah, for sure. Sometimes I got to put myself in that mindset too. I forget, like I said, enjoying the moment.
Last question here.
Okay.
What advice would you give to aspiring muralists and painters who want to make a meaningful impact on their communities?
All right, this goes out to young up and coming artists. Advice I would say is to travel. You know, get outside of the city, get outside your neighborhood, go to New York, go to LA, go to Miami, go to Seattle, or travel the country, travel the world, leave the country. Because there's so much, I feel like that's the only way you're gonna learn. Like once you learn and bring something back to yourself, I think that's really like what pushes you as a creative to the next whatever you want to say. Or you learn even more about yourself. Like you learn more about who you are and what your art's about when you travel different places.
Is there anything else that you want to say?
I just want to say to the viewers, stay tuned for the the next podcast.
That concludes this episode of the podcast.